Hello everybody, welcome to a SUPboarder video. In this video we're going to be looking at the Aqua Marina Hyper Touring board. This is a standalone review. Remember, standalone reviews for SUPboarder is where we're going to be testing them on the water. We're going to be transporting them to the water, telling you what the backpack is like, what it's like to inflate, of course what the board paddles like and feels like, who it will be best suited for, and finishing off with the pros and cons about the board and really if this board is the sort of board you should be looking at to buy. So the Aqua Marina Hyper has been in the Aqua Marina range for the last few years. We did an overview with this board included, but this is the first time we've actually given this board a proper standalone review. This is the 12.6 by 32, which we've got on review, and they also make an 11.6 by 31. Both those boards are 6 inches thick and they both retail at around €599. The volume of this one, the 12.6, is 355 litres, and the weight of this one, we weighed it, weighs 11.93 kilograms. The construction of both the Aqua Marina touring boards, they are double chamber boards, which is where they have an internal chamber that you inflate first, and then you have the outer chamber, the rest of the board, that you then inflate to 15 psi. The materials of these boards are the same as the other Aqua Marina boards, internal core of drop stitch, wrapped with multiple layers of PVC around that. At the retail price at €599, you are going to be getting a bag, a pump, and a leash, but you are not getting a paddle with that package. Aqua Marina boards are sold right around the world and they are sold on lots of different websites. Therefore, you can get them at very competitive prices. There is a retail price of €599 for this board, but we have seen it cheaper than that on the internet if you hunt around. So now we're going to talk about what it's like to transport in the bag, what it's like to inflate, and what it's like to use on the water. Now with all the Aqua Marina boards you do get fairly lightweight bags. This is their slightly better bag. It's a zipped backpack bag. It has got slightly wider shoulder straps than the more basic Aqua Marina bag, but there is no padding around the back, and therefore it isn't the most comfortable bag if you're going to be carrying it long distances. When you get to your paddle location, there's nothing complicated when it comes to getting the board ready. You will inflate the internal chamber first, and then you will inflate the back valve, which is the rest of the board, to 15 psi. The pump it comes with is a little basic. It's a two-way pump, pumps on the upstroke and on the downstroke, and then you can change the pressure and release it so it just pumps on the downstroke when you get a lot of build-up in your arms. As I say, the pump works, it's adequate. The dial is a little bit more basic, but at a cheaper price point package, it's a sort of pump we'd expect to find. But if you're using it a lot, again, in time, just like the bag, it might be something that you want to upgrade. It is a fairly big board, so pumping it up with that pump does take a little bit longer opposed to the bigger double chamber pumps. But the advantage of having that pump and the bag, to be honest, it's a small, lightweight pump and bag. So if you want to roll it up, put it in under the bungees on the front and take it with you when you're paddling, it is very good for that. So there is always pros and cons to every type of bag and pump. The leash it comes with is ideal for light paddling, light touring, basically using it in general paddling conditions. If you're going to be going out in some really rough stuff or more extreme conditions or windy conditions, definitely worth upgrading the leash. But we personally really like the leashes because they're lightweight and they do just keep you in contact with the board and stop the board from skipping away from you if you fall in. Again, it's a basic leash, worth an upgrade, but it does do 90% of paddling absolutely fine, and it's definitely nice and lightweight. You don't really feel like you're wearing it. Carrying the board to the water, you've only got one handle on this board. Some other inflatable paddle boards on the market have got handles on the front, on the back and the sides. This, you just have a central carry handle. It is a padded, neoprene wrapped carry handle, and it's a fairly chunky handle that's in the middle of the board, so it is easy to carry, and the board isn't that heavy, so it doesn't really take much to get it to the water's edge. When you get on this board and paddle it, the first thing you'll notice is actually how quick this board paddles. It's a 32-inch wide board, which, as we know, is what most people sort of get into the sport. It's a good average width for a lot of people, but 32 wide isn't actually a fast width because it can offer a lot of drag throughout the whole length of the board. But because this board has a nice pulled in nose entry, very pointy nose, and a very pulled in towards the tail, it doesn't have a lot of drag when it's going through the water, so it still is really quite a quick board. So that's the first thing you'll notice, and the first thing we noticed when we stood on this board and put our first couple paddle strokes in. But because it is pulled in at the nose and at the tail, it isn't going to be as stable as those wider tailed and nose boards. 32 wide, like I just said, but it doesn't carry that width right to the tail. Disadvantage is it's a little bit more unstable. So if you're moving to do your step back turns and moving around the board and pivoting on the tail, it's not going to have as much stability as a wider based board would do. But then again, that's a pro and con for a lot of people. A lot of people aren't wanting to do those sort of step back turns and they want to have a bit more speed gains. So it's definitely a price that you pay by having a slightly narrower tail. The rocker line of the board, which is the curve of the board from front to the back, is basically flat, if not a tiny bit of reverse rocker, where the nose actually comes down a little bit at the front. We've seen this on some of the Aqua Marina race boards as well. The interesting thing about this is when you stand on the board on the water, obviously any inflatable paddleboard will bend, it will deflect, it will bend up. When you get on the board then, because it's a reverse rocker, it actually neutralizes and has a perfectly flat rocker line. Again, this is another reason why this board will paddle quite quickly. Because that flat rocker line is probably a bit better in flat water than it is open choppy water. You will find more of the waves or the chop when you're punching into wind. The water will wrap over the nose of the board, but it probably doesn't offer as much performance in choppier open waters as a board with a bit more rocker. But then if you're using it on more flat water, it's a faster board to paddle. So again, it's a pros and cons with having less rocker, better on flat water, not so good in choppy open waters. But the other really good thing about having that slightly negative rocker there on that nose is you can put a lot of weight on this board before the board really starts to bend. So you can get a large amount of cargo up on the front there, and you can put cargo or dry bags at the back. The bungee straps are really well placed. Will, our touring expert, was really complimentive about this board and how the bungees are in a really good place. You can still load up the back of the board, but you can still step over the bungees to do your step back turns, which is one of his really big pros he always goes on about. It's still nice to maneuver the board. He also said that when you are paddling with a good amount of weight that you're probably doing for a multi-day trip, this board still paddles with a good amount of glide, again because of that outline shape and because it's pulled into the tail. So definitely a lot of pros there for people getting into touring, wanting to put weight on their board but still wanting a board with a good amount of glide. Another thing that Will noted, definitely from a touring sense, is you are going to be able to transport this board easily because it's a fairly lightweight board. So for overseas iSUP trips, going on airplanes, going on buses, trains, you aren't going to have to carry such a heavy board, and therefore your other kit as well, your sleeping bags, your tents possibly, you can keep the weight down, and just transporting your iSUP on those sort of touring adventures is a little bit easier. Other things that are worth mentioning on the board, looking at the features and fittings and the materials of the board, the bungee straps are definitely really worth a mention. These bungee straps are thicker and better in quality than we have seen boards at 3 times the price. This board's also got a kick pad. It's a simple thing. If you're getting into step back turns, transitioning to the back of the board, having a raised EVA pad that you can ram your foot against is a lot easier when you start to do pivot or buoy turns. The graphics and the look of the board are always a personal thing, but the way they've put the graphics onto the front of the board, they're very well finished. This board has been used for over a month now, hasn't got any signs of wearing or scratches on the main graphics itself, so they are well stuck on and they do actually look pretty good on this board in general. Other things to talk about when you're on the water is the tracking of the board. How well does it go in a straight line? Because it comes with a nice swept-back touring slide-in clip fin box, which not many other iSUPs have the clip fin box with that size fin. It's a really nice fin that it comes with this board. Makes it track and go in a straight line really easily. At the back of the board you have a PVC rail, which is where the water doesn't drag or catch around the back of the board. The water then leaves the back of the board underneath in a much smoother way. It then makes it faster, less drag at the tail of the board. It's definitely something you notice again with the outline shape. Gives it that faster feeling in the water. Not enough inflatable touring or race boards have those on the back of the board, so it's nice to see that on a moderately priced inflatable. Well, the last thing we're going to talk about is the deflection of the board. How bendy is this iSUP? We put all our inflatable paddle boards through a deflection test when we review them, which is where we put them on a gap of 1.5 meters apart, and we put a weight of 75 kilograms in the center, and then we measure how much the board bends or deflects. A really stiff board, the top end price point boards that are sitting at, double the price, a bit more than this, are sitting about 7 millimeters, and the most flexible boards on the market are sitting around 26-27 millimeters. This board dropped 17 millimeters. That is okay, but for a double chamber board, I would expect it to really be sitting more at the sort of 14 or 15 millimeters. So it's definitely not as stiff as some other comparable boards on the market, but it is a lighter weight board than those heavier base boards. So again, there's always a pro and con to everything. So you get a lighter base board, but it's not as stiff as some comparable boards on the market with double chamber. A quick little note about double chamber boards, they do two things really. One, you can look at it from a safety aspect. If you do get a puncture or a hole in the outer shell of your board, you have a center chamber that still has got air in it. Or you can look at it as a stiffness thing. We personally would rather look at it more of an extra stiffness thing. Having a double chamber does add a lot of stiffness to the board. So if you took the double chamber out, this board at 17 millimeters will probably be more like around 20 millimeters in deflection. So by putting a double chamber in, you're giving the board a lot more stiffness, which then adds to a lot more performance when you're paddling it. But as I said, it also gives you that secondary safety aspect as well. When it comes to packing and rolling this board up, you've got to do it slightly differently because there is an internal chamber and you've got the outer chamber board. You've got to deflate both of those. To get all the air out of the center chamber fully, you've got to put your pump hose onto the foot pegs of the pump. And there you can suck the air out of the center chamber, allowing you to roll it up. Because unfortunately, the valve of the center chamber isn't at the back of the board, so when you roll it up from the front, you can't get all the air out unless you use that deflation setting on the pump. When you do get the air out of the board and you roll it up nice and tight, you can roll this board up fairly small because the slide-in click fin box at the back there is a flexible fin box. So you can either roll it up around the pump or you can fold it up. You can pretty much do what you want to get the board in the bag. When you're putting your board in the bag, it's not the biggest of bags, but it does fit the board okay as soon as you get hang of rolling it up. The bag could be a little bit bigger maybe in the future, but then also having a bag that's the right size for your board does make it a little bit more comfortable when you're carrying it. We spoke about carrying it and transporting it. It's exactly the same as when you're taking it home from your paddle location. Okay to walk moderate distances, but not the most padding in there for a longer distance walk. Other stuff to talk about the Aqua Marina brand, about the environmental awareness of this brand and the board and the warranty that you get. Aqua Marina have been making iSUPs for a long time. They have a huge share in the market and you very much, like I said before, can buy them anywhere around the world and they are at a very competitive price point. Definitely they're not trying to be the most expensive paddleboard in the market and they're not trying to be the cheapest. As far as looking at the environment with the materials that go in this board and the materials that are wrapped up on this board when you buy it new, unfortunately there's still a lot of plastic when it's wrapped up and brand new out of the box. You still have got to unroll a lot of plastic. Some brands, some of the more expensive brands are coming with paper or cloth. They're reducing their plastic altogether, which is the way we want to see all of the inflatable paddleboard brands going. So definitely that is something where Aqua Marina can improve in the future. And also there isn't any reusable or recyclable products in this board itself that we're aware of. A lot of brands are trying to work towards it and we would like to see Aqua Marina working towards that in the future as well. Warranty wise, this board comes with a 1-year warranty, and because there's distributors right around the world, if you have any problems you should be able to contact them directly and get your board sorted out. So finishing off with pros and cons, value for money and a summary of who will best suit the Aqua Marina 12.6 Hyper. The pros, the board is a fairly lightweight board which will be great for those traveling tourers. The decks and the way they've set up with the cargo straps are really well thought out and you can get a large amount of weight on the front and the back of the board. The bungees are very good quality, better than we've seen more expensive boards. The outline shape of the board is a fast, easy, quick board to paddle and at 32 wide still offers you a good amount of width around the standing area, and the PVC runner at the back of the board definitely helps the speed of the board. Put together with the touring slide-in fin, it really is a nice setup for touring or paddling long distances. The cons, I would expect this board to be a tiny bit stiffer for the deflection test that we put it through. The bag and the pump is a little bit basic. It is going to get you on the water, but probably it's something you're going to upgrade in time unless you want that smaller bag that you can roll up and take with your inflatable paddleboard on your journey. Like all touring boards, it could do with a carry handle at the front and the back. The bag could be a little bit bigger as well, and a really good point from Will. He said he did a 10 miler on this and the deck pad did make his feet a little bit sore after a while. So a thicker or a different deck grip would be better if you're paddling longer distances, or you're going to have to wear boots when you're thinking about that. When it comes to the finishing detail of the boards, the Aqua Marina boards always look really good and the graphics are smart, but maybe they are suffering sometimes with the finishing details of these boards. So maybe the rails, the way they're finished off, they won't look as crisp or as well finished as the more expensive brands. But that's something you're going to expect to get at the price point. Value for money, well, if you are looking to get into touring, you have got a pretty competitive price point board there. 599 euros. It sits at a comfortable place in the market. Not the most expensive, not the cheapest. It is adequate at that price and it's what you'd expect to pay. Even if you're thinking about upgrading the bag and the pump afterwards, you still do get a good overall board to get yourself into touring. So who do we think it will best suit? Well, you could get into paddleboarding using this board. I mean, it's 32 wide, so you could put your friends on it. Definitely, you're going to have to be the lighter person if you're trying to get on this as your first time paddleboard, sub 85 kilograms. Max weight, if you're into paddleboarding and you want to get into touring, maybe 95 kilograms, it'll take you comfortably. It would take more than that, but because of the pulled in tail, the thinner tail, which makes it quicker, it's a little bit trickier to stand and maneuver around the board using the back of the tail there. It is really pushing towards obviously the more tourers out there, trying to get you to cover more ground, to paddle around the corner, to do overnighters. You are going to be able to load up the board at front and back, and definitely if you're up to 80 kilograms, you're going to be able to put a lot of weight on the front and the back of the board and do multi-day trips with this paddleboard. So definitely more of an entry-level board, but for somebody who wants to get into touring and paddling further, but still having a board that's fairly easy to paddle in a straight line with a good amount of glide, weighing up to 95 kilograms at a maximum. I hope you found that SUPboarder review interesting and informative. We're really there to highlight the pros and cons of these boards to help you understand if these boards are right for you. Any questions or comments, please get back to us on SUPboarder and on YouTube. But until next time, we'll see you on another SUPboarder video. Thank you very much.